afternoon. In a continuation from last week's discussion board, where I discussed American loyalists during the Revolution, I want to look and focus on their sentiments thereafter the American Revolution. For this week's discussion board, and utilizing the Oxford's repository of online ebooks in accordance with the discussion board's requirements, I found two books that are prominent in discussing the American loyalists after the American Revolution. The first of the two books I discovered was Remaking the British Empire, The United States and the British Empire After American Independence by Peter Marshall. Um, you know, After the American Revolution, the Loyalists, one of their big questions was, what are we supposed to do? They're unsure of uh, what their life is to look like, what the structure of the country is to look like after being under British rule for such a long period of time. Um, Marshall says in his book that American patriots did not expel their enemies. They generally wished to force them into conformity rather than drive them out. They tried to integrate them into society. A majority of the Loyalists did stay in the colonies and moving westward, and then some of them did migrate northward into Canada and to other British territories that we'll talk about in just a minute. Um, as I said, many of the Loyalists simply coexisted within the Patriot Society that started to take shape there after the American Revolution, that would materialize into the new United States of America. Marshall says that the people often put family concerns over the demands of Congresses, committees, and generals. In comparison to common thought, this led to a rather peaceful assimilation to a more Americanized way of life for the Loyalists. However, not much differed in the way business was conducted. For as normal, this was the way the colonies and colonists were used to conducting business. Um, Not a lot of difference for many of them. They still had their sentiments towards Great Britain, but they knew in order to survive in the new American colonies, they were going to have to assimilate into that patriot way. Marshall states in the book that the typical loyalist was probably little indifference in most respect from the American settler. Each were having to learn a new way of life apart from the British rule, and as the colonies grew, the multitude were migrating westward, looking to create a new prosperous life. Um, the second of the sources that I want to focus on this week is another book entitled Canada and the British Empire by J.M. Bumstead. In his book, Bumstead discusses the integration of the Loyalist population in North America following the Revolution, just as Marshall does in his Remaking the British Atlantic. He says, following the Revolution, many of the Loyalists and soldiers of the Crown began the process of resettlement within what remained to Great Britain in the New World, from Nova Scotia to Quebec to Florida to the Caribbean area. So there's a lot of these outcroppings that still were under British rule. Again, as I said before, many of the Loyalists stayed in the American colonies, but several of them did disperse out to these other holdings of the British Empire. Just as in Marshall's Remaking the British Atlantic, the United States and the British Empire after American independence, Bumstead reiterates that many of the Loyalists who were left in the colonies assimilated into the Americanized culture that was taking shape, including the migration westward to establish new life. However, in Bumstead's book, he does give focus to the established Loyalist communities that were set up in places such as Canada and these other outcroppings. In the book, he places emphasis on the reinforcement of existing liberal political and constitutional ideas that remained in the loyal British colonies. And he says that the Loyalists within these communities fought against the encroaching Americanized way of governance that was constant until the War of 1812. So, a short depiction of what life would look like for those American loyalists thereafter the end of the American Revolution. Um, I hope that you have learned from these discussions concerning the Loyalists during and thereafter the American Revolution, and I look forward to watching and reviewing your discussions this week. Thanks. Have a great day.